Jesus Freak here. And coming back off a couple days of being more or less dead. Just out of it. Now, I am a Jesus freak. My channel draws the attention of Jesus freaks. And Jesus freaks tend to lean conservative. But it shouldn't shock you that for many of the reasons that a lot of my followers on YouTube are politically conservative, I'm not. But you should be clear that that doesn't mean that I'm faking my opinions about, about my faith, that my faith is fake or whatever. Because it's a common accusation that Republicanism and Christianity have to necessarily go hand in hand. Frankly, they don't and they shouldn't. A lot of people seem to have bought into this concept that's been going around, longer than I've been alive. This idea called various things: Kingdom Now, Dominionism, Seven Mountains Mandate. Now, the thing is, a lot of this stuff comes from two particular sources. One of these is groups within the Church of Rome, particular groups like Opus Dei. It's like, a lot of people said Opus Dei is a conspiracy theory. You're starting to find people now to be more willing to accept Opus Dei is an actual thing. The other is Pentecostal charismatics. Now, you might say, you're talking about our brothers in Christ. And honestly, if you're looking at this specific group, and I'm not saying Pentecostals in general, I'm talking about Pentecostal charismatics in particular, a group that sometimes refers, they're about as schizophrenic about their name as the Mormons. Just like some of them are like, yeah, we're fine with that. And others are like, that's a damn slur, don't you dare call us that! Well, you have the same thing here. Some people say, New Apostolic Reformation is a name that they came up with, and then some of them will say, how dare you even think there's such a thing as a New Apostolic Reformation? How dare you! Because honestly, these people, the attitude reeks of roid rage. Well, there's this attitude among these people, that if they want Jesus to come back, they got to bring him back. It's a New Apostolic Reformation that gave you stuff like the Passion Translation, which is basically a level of rewriting the Bible on the level of what Joseph Smith did in the 1840s. A lot of influential people are in this circle because, a lot of this stuff dovetails with other kind of problematic beliefs. Jesus calling, Norman Vincent Peale, plus power of positive thinking. This stuff's been going on longer than I've been alive. Now, I've made no bones about the fact that I have physical and mental disabilities. Oh, but you're intelligent. How can you be mentally disabled? I'm basically min-maxed. I've got a lot of, book smarts that don't have a lot of practical smarts. And I've got a lot of other baggage that I'm dealing with. So I have to say, as someone who's deals with disabilities, that I feel like people like me have been sold down the river. Because some people forget the timeline of what was going on 4-5 years ago. They're like, oh, in 2020 my gas prices were cheap. Why were they cheap? Do you remember what was going on around the world? And why gas prices were cheap and then shot up? And eventually, yes, under Biden, they did go up to 383.9 or 89 around here. And right now, as I'm shooting this video, they're 329.9. Niagara Falls is pretty close to the rest of the U.S. As average when it comes to gas prices. So I use gas prices are here as a good benchmark of what they are in general. They're cheaper in some states, more expensive in others. But we're a pretty good middle of the road here. Well, a lot of people put blame on politicians for things that frankly have nothing to do with them. You want the free market, but you're going to blame politicians every time the free market doesn't go your way. You can't have a free market economy and a control market economy like the Soviets at the same time. Sorry, just noticed that I forgot to get rid of a little bit of shaving cream on my ear. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why what happened Tuesday happened. On one hand, people associate the entire Democratic Party with a very loud contingent in the Democratic Party that's always blaming white people for everything. It's blaming men for everything, blaming Christians for everything. And somehow they forget that there are people who are both Christian and Democrat. I'm not one of them. I'm an independent. I just happen to frequently vote Democratic because I feel that there's a large contingent in the Republican Party that wants people like me dead. And another thing also deals with the Democratic Party is that people genuinely don't like their politics. They're actual libertarians, mostly, some of them. These are people who just want to be left alone and see Democrats as the big government party. And there's people who are single issue voters. Most of the time, the single issue is abortion. These are all reasons, and they may be valid for some people, why people might refuse to vote for Democrats. There's other people who see Democrats as the they-them group. Again, social justice wankers. Or the party of people of color. Because a lot of minority people tended to go Democrats. Frankly, because the Republicans hated them and often tried to shoo them away. There's a lot of racism in the Republican Party. There's a lot of sexism in the Republican Party. There's a lot of ableism in the Republican Party, and this is one of the big issues I have and why I don't tend to vote Republican. There's a lot of people who are Republicans who see mental illness and sometimes even lesser physical ailments, like a bad heart or something, as a moral failure. And they want to do away with SSI because they think it just encourages people to get false diagnoses. They want to do away with food stamps because they bought into Ronald Reagan's canard about the welfare queen. In fact, there's so many restrictions on food stamps, it's almost impossible to abuse. They closed almost every loophole the system has decades ago. How do I know? I've been on food stamps for decades, and they had those loopholes closed before I even got on food stamps. But they want to do away with the program because they think it's just, people trying to use the program. You realize that people who are able of body and mind and yet wind up on food stamps are required to work for them and have to pay back that money when they get off the program. Or when they transition from being on one government program to another program that gives them more money. When I transitioned off welfare, when I moved and got on SSI instead, they pumped me through the Social Security Administration to get my welfare money back. I think they took about half my check. These programs are not as easy to abuse as people think. It's like, some people look at me and say, you're smart. You don't have any problems doing basic human being adult stuff. Why are you sitting on your ass every day collecting disability? There's a difference between having the capability to do something and other people recognizing that. Frankly, businesses think I'm unemployable, and the government thinks I'm unemployable. And I don't just sit around like people think. I do my best to try to get out and do stuff within the limitations of my situation. I don't have a lot of money, and I have to live within my means. And it might not look it. I live on a very tight budget. I just manage to do well with what I have. It's like Paul said, I've had a lot. I've had not enough to get by. And I've managed in both. But I try to see the big picture in things. There's a lot of people who all they see is a black woman. All they see is an Asian American woman. All they see is someone who doesn't believe in the same version of Christianity they do. All they see is other. And they long for a return of a glory days that frankly never happened. But they've convinced themselves of. Because memory is a funny thing. Things are probably going to get a bit rougher for me over the coming years. They're going to get rougher for people like me. And honestly, they're probably going to get rougher for a lot of people who ask for this change. Because it's one thing if you don't know what you're doing. And you're surrounded by people who think they can keep you in check. But when you come back and you're surrounded by sycophants, or you're surrounded by, worse, people who think they can use you to gain power for themselves, we'll probably be in for a pretty rough ride these next 4 years. Frankly, if you think the man whose closest thing to a book of Holy Scriptures is a copy of Mein Kampf is more Christian than an avowed Baptist, just because she has a Sanskrit name, or just because you think that one's ethnicity inherently makes one person better than another. You know the definition of white people widens as conservatives need more support, and then narrows as they no longer need it. The same is true of Christian. The same people that are accepting Italians and Irish Americans and Polish Americans now, and accepting Catholics now. Don't be surprised when they decide that only Pentecostal charismatics of Anglo-Saxon descent are true Christians. And don't be surprised when their eliminationist rhetoric stops being hyperbolic and starts leading to actual eliminations. Because frankly, a lot of you were short-sighted. I'm speaking broadly, not just my viewer base. All you saw was someone managed to pack the courts well enough that he got Roe versus Wade overturned. And that at some point during his presidency, gas prices were the lowest they'd been in 25 years. But you didn't see the big picture. Frankly, I disagree with Democrats on a lot of things. But they don't, as a general rule, go talking about how they'd starve me to death if they could. I hear a lot of that from Republicans. I've heard a lot of that from Republicans 35 years ago. This is nothing new. Oh, but a lot of Republicans are on social... Yeah, they just cut off the nose to spite their face. Or because they thought that going back to 1865 was more important than their survival. Because they're doomed too. The Kingdom Now types have a very bizarre reading of Scripture, and they forget. When Jesus was here, physically, he wouldn't let people turn him into a literal king with a crown and everything. And he told Pilate, he said, my kingdom's not of this world. But these people don't understand it. They don't even see the same Jesus that is taught about in the Bible. Yes, he's an avenger. Yes, he's going to come back and wipe out a lot of humanity. No, he doesn't need your help doing it. And the New Apostolic Reformation needs to remember there are 12 apostles, not however many they think are going to be around, whatever, or there's only going to be 12 ever called the apostles. Yes, I'm one of those people who believes that Matthias wasn't the real replacement for Judas, and Paul was. There are no modern-day apostles and modern-day prophets. That ship sailed after the apostolic age. That ship sailed in the 2nd and 3rd century. And these people think what they're doing is tantamount to writing a 67th book of the Bible. These are the people who, frankly, they're using Donald Trump for their own gains. Honestly, a lot of Republican politicians right now are useful idiots to the Pentecostal charismatic movement. I think people need to get out there and reveal, frankly, atheists have been better at pointing out what the Bible really says than we have. Because a lot of us have been sitting around on our laurels and thinking that just because we've been the dominant class, that we'll always be the dominant class. Someone like me recognizes that political power doesn't do the Christians any good. People get mad. But a lot of people have confused being Christian with being white, being Christian with being American, or frankly neo-Confederate. And they miss the whole point. But a lot of people will itch their ears, tell them what they want to hear. We're going to rise again! You're not putting your trust in God. And frankly, you're rejecting God for a God of your own making, a Jesus of your own making. I understand this is probably going to turn a lot of people off who watch me. But I felt this had to be said. From my perspective, since this is a perspective that's kind of lacking here on YouTube. Anyway. Jesus freak out.